Um, please let me know if I could see a thumbs up that folks can see the PowerPoint. That would be awesome. I see some hands raised. Great. Hi, I'm Stefanie Arbutina, and I am the Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice Policy Director at Children First. We are so happy to have you here. Please, I would love to welcome you to our webinar, The State of Diversion. Really quickly, I'm going to walk us through the agenda and why we're here. We're here to learn about youth diversion. What is it? How is it being used here in Pennsylvania? Its effectiveness for youth and as a crime prevention strategy. We're also going to take a look at some statewide juvenile justice data and some county level data, both generally and specific to diversion. We're also going to hear, which I'm really excited about, 2 efforts underway to expand diversion across Pennsylvania. You're about to hear from some great speakers. Kicking us off will be our own Attorney General, Dave Sunday, followed by 2 county leaders doing amazing work in youth diversion right now, Angela Bell, Assistant District Attorney and Director of the Youth Aid Program in Montgomery County, and Sue Claytor, Deputy Director of Administrative Services at York County Probation. And I'm going to share a little bit about the data available to us, and then Representative Rick Krajewski from Philadelphia will share about a bill he's getting ready to introduce. Following that, we'll talk about another effort to expand diversion through budget investment, and then we'll let you know what you can do if you support this work. First, a little housekeeping. We'll ask that folks be muted to limit interruptions to the speakers, but please feel free to jot your questions down and save them for the end or put them in the chat. My colleague, Sadie Sprague-Lott, is on and will be monitoring the chat. We'll go through all those questions when all the speakers are finished. Before we kick things off, I just want to share very quickly what we mean when we say diversion when we're talking about young people. Diversion is a proven approach to address low-level criminal or delinquent behavior outside of the formal court system. It can occur at multiple points during the process in which a young person's involved with the legal system. This can be pre-arrest, which means before a child's arrested. It can mean police bringing a child home or connecting them to a program. Pre-petition or pre-charge, so they've been arrested before charges have been officially filed in juvenile court. Or it can be pre-adjudication and after charges are filed, but before a trial. And sometimes young people complete services and then the charges don't go all the way through the process. Diversion doesn't have to be a specific program, but it can and often is. It includes restorative justice approaches where kids can make amends with anyone they've harmed, individual or family counseling, substance abuse treatment, or other forms of support. It gets to the root causes of behavior. So for today's discussion, that's what we're referencing. So now I would love to turn things over to our introductory speaker. I'm going to pause the screen share. Attorney General Dave Sunday was elected in 2024 as Pennsylvania's Attorney General. General Sunday is a career prosecutor, having previously served as the District Attorney of York County. As District Attorney, General Sunday was at the forefront of diversion via treatment courts and re-entry, building on his philosophy of the criminal justice system, which he summarizes with the words accountability and redemption. General Sunday, turning it to you.
All right, Stefanie, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with everyone from Children's First. And I was asked to give a little bit of an introduction today. And I thought that what I would do is just talk a little bit about why I believe in diversion and really what got me, to this place mentally as a prosecutor in Pennsylvania. And so, by way of background, and I'm sure many, many people on this call will have dealt with this, but in law school, they don't teach you about things like substance abuse, addiction. They don't teach you about the mental health crisis. They don't teach you about diversion or anything of the, things like that. As a lawyer, you go to law school, you get out and you get to work. And so that's what I did. And, I joined the Navy right out of high school. So I worked with a lot of people who struggled earlier in life. I did the same thing when I worked at UPS for 8 years. And those interactions I had really helped lay the groundwork for where I ultimately went on a lot of these policy issues. And so when I started out as a prosecutor in York, and Sue, it's great to have you on this. A lot of good things coming out of York County. When I started, I had no idea what to expect. And on day one, I was in a courtroom and I was prosecuting cases, and prosecutors were given guidelines as to what you would look at with regard to the type of offer to make in a case. And the days go on and the cases go on, and there's hundreds of them sometimes a day that you work through. And really, it changed drastically for me when the opioid epidemic hit. And so this was back in, I'm going to say like 2015, when the opioid epidemic started decimating New York County. We realized very quickly that we needed to really see if there was a different approach to the way we handled criminal justice, because our prisons were being just full. They're being filled up with people that had severe addiction issues, that were addicted to heroin at the time. And, it just didn't feel right. The outcomes weren't what we wanted to see. And so we really dug deep. We worked together as a team across the whole county, and we collaborated, which ultimately led to us forming a nonprofit called the York Opioid Collaborative. Through that entire experience of my life professionally, I spent so much time with the community and with my colleagues all throughout the county. And we ended up creating diversion programs, pre-arrest diversion programs, pre-trial diversion programs. We ramped up our treatment courts. We worked in our prisons to identify ways that we could work with inmates to address some of the issues that resulted in their criminal conduct. We worked with the entire community to develop ways that we could enhance reentry and that we could decrease barriers to reentry, so people would have, the highest likelihood of positive outcomes coming out of prison. And I shared this with you because, where we ultimately landed is completely different from where we started. And we looked at the individual holistically. We looked at the case. We obviously looked at the impact on the victim, but but every one of us, meaning the DA's office, police, members, community advocates, we asked ourselves, what was the best way to make our community safer? And it all comes down to obviously decreasing recidivism and doing everything we can to make sure that bad things don't happen in the first place. And so to that point, we work through and when you look at diversion, so obviously everything we did with addiction, and then we moved into the mental health framework. And I want to say that this is important because, when you collaborate and you have great outcomes, people like to see that. And when crime goes down, and when violent crime goes down, when families remain together, when people are employed, it's this just amazing situation that people want to be a part of. And so I can tell you right now that, when you look at diversion, if you don't apply diversion to the way you think about criminal justice, then you're looking at every case the exact same. And you're essentially creating a scenario where you can't stop incidents from happening in the future. You can't put someone on a path to no longer commit crimes. And ultimately, everybody ends up in jail. And the data is overwhelming that doesn't always increase public safety. All of this led to my philosophy of accountability and redemption. You have to hold people accountable. Without accountability, nothing else matters. As a prosecutor, I can tell you as a dad and as a son, I dealt with accountability when I was a kid. But, you have to have accountability. But accountability doesn't always mean, 800 years in prison. Accountability can mean an apology letter under the right circumstances. It can mean probation. It could mean a very short stint in incarceration. It could mean a long and lengthy time working through treatment courts. Again, as a prosecutor, there are a lot of defendants who would rather sit in a prison cell than go through a treatment court. And the reason for that is because they're difficult. And treatment courts hold people accountable. You have to work. You have to go to, everything prescribed by the court. You have to try to find a job. You have to not get in trouble. You have to go to your treatment. You have to do everything that's asked of you. And for a lot of people, that's not easy. But you're holding them accountable. And at the end of the day, the data is overwhelming that when people are held accountable, especially through treatment courts, which is a form of diversion, then not only are you making the community safer? You're keeping families together. You're decreasing the prison population, which saves millions of dollars in taxpayer funds. And you're also just very simply setting people up to be successful in life. And I think that's just unbelievably important. I have continued to embrace this philosophy as Attorney General, and I will continue to do so. I will, right now, the Attorney General's office, we have the LEDI initiative, which I'm sure a lot of you may know about. Since I've taken office, 3 additional counties have come on board. That's a pre-charge diversion, where individuals that have severe drug addiction challenges. Right now, obviously, most of it circles around opioids still, which is fentanyl is typically what it is. But someone's arrested, they're given a choice, and the choice is you can go through all of these different programs. You can do all the things we're asking you, and if you can successfully do it, then the outcome, sometimes the charges might be dropped, sometimes they might be decreased, but you're rewarding someone for a certain type of behavior. I also want to talk briefly about, we hear a lot about gang violence, and in particular when we're talking about juveniles. And I know that the framework here, obviously the focus is juveniles, but we have to understand diversion, and we have to understand what it looks like, and so that we can articulate it and make sure that people buy in. And juveniles in particular can be very difficult due to the circumstances of their lives. But saying that, there's an initiative that we utilize in York that I know is done in other parts of the state and the country called group violence intervention. Group violence intervention is an evidence-based initiative where you use credible messengers. A lot of you probably know about it. And you go into the community, you identify individuals that are likely to commit crimes of violence, and you pull them in and you give them a choice. And this is important because my experience has been that I'm going to say 98% of individuals that are involved in violent crime, be it an adult, be it a juvenile, I mean, nobody wants to be in these places. And from my experience, I have seen some of the most, hardened, violent offenders desperately want a chance. And we've seen people take that chance. We've seen them take advantage of it through maybe schooling, through obtaining maybe an HVAC degree or something of that nature, and really changing their lives. And so, I don't really have a specific agenda for my introduction to you this morning, and so I'm kind of just riffing on my feelings on diversion. I think that the important takeaways here are that we have to be thoughtful about the way that we do this, and if we truly want our communities to be safe, it takes a lot of work, and we have to be committed to putting that work in, to not just taking the easy path. I mean, the easy path is, hey, the person committed a crime, and here's what the guidelines are. You're going to jail, whatever the judge wants. But the way that we in York and other counties have decreased crime tremendously is through being more thoughtful, through taking time, through embracing evidence-based initiatives, and working together as a team, to find ways to keep people from committing crimes down the road. When we talk about juveniles, how am I doing on time, Ben? Am I okay? What? You're over. Am I over? Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I'll just say this. So sorry, guys. I'm AG now, and I don't get to talk about these fun things as much as I did as DA. And so, this is I'm excited to have this conversation. I know you have a whole agenda, but I'll leave you with this, that, some of the hardest things we do through a public policy perspective are things that take a lot of time. And, there's so many challenges out there that we face that you can't just solve in a day and tweet that night and say, hey, I took care of whatever this issue is, right? The hardest, most challenging things we deal with are public policy, issues that will take maybe decades to fix. And because it doesn't fit neatly within the political cycle of 2 or 4 years, sometimes people kind of walk away from it because it's not instant gratification. You know, I've been at this now going on 18 years. And I can tell you right now that it's beyond worth it. You know, when you see lives changed, it's amazing what that does to the community, what that does to people that may not understand how important it is to embrace redemption. And I'm committed to it, and I'm excited to be here with you. So I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your discussion today. I would love to sit here and be a part of it. And, you know, if I slightly rambled, I apologize. But, you know, there's so much to talk about with diversion. But, you know, I thank everyone here for your commitment to this. And, you know, this is an issue that is a human issue, and I have no doubt that we will continue to do great work together. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you for having me, and God bless.
Thank you so much, General. Have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate you joining us today. All right, I'm going to return to the screen share really quick. All right, hopefully that is still working. All right. So we just heard those really inspiring words about redemption and the power of chances. Now we're going to talk to some leaders who are, not to be redundant, leading the way on making this happen. We're going to talk about what diversion for young people looks like in practice. And we are highlighting 2 counties of the several that are doing this great work every day. But wanted to introduce to you first Angela Bell, who is Assistant District Attorney in Montgomery County. She leads the county's youth aid panel work. And then Sue Claytor will be joining us from York County, from York County Probation Department to talk about their work. So I'm going to turn it to Angela to start us off.
So, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Stefanie for inviting me. And I don't know if the Attorney General is still on, but I want to thank him for the setup. His comments were the perfect setup for me to talk about Montgomery County's Youth Aid Panel Juvenile Diversion Program. Montgomery County District Attorney's Office offers a juvenile diversion program for children between the ages of 10 and 18-year-old high school seniors. What you're looking at right here is telling you about our national recognition. I'm very proud of the work that the district attorney and I have been able to do with our efforts to support children. But our youth aid panel program, if you think about Stefanie's opening slide, we are the pre-petition, right? Children that are referred to our youth aid panel program have the opportunity to avoid going into the juvenile justice system. They have an opportunity to avoid having a record that can get in the way of them getting into college, the military, certain jobs by completing this program. I'm glad that the Attorney General talked about the things that you can do with diversion, because that is how we approach diversion in Montgomery County with our diversion program. First and foremost, as he said, the primary focus of our program is to hold kids accountable for the mistakes that they make. Our program gives them an opportunity to take responsibility for the mistakes they made. But just as important as that is the program is based on balanced and restorative justice, and therefore it gives us an opportunity while the children are with us to build competency, right? And children that come through our diversion program not only have tasks that they have to complete based on the offense that they committed, but they also, we send them for programs and services that address their individual needs. What I tell people all the time is my expectation with this program is to plant a seed. We only have the children with us for a short period of time. So I try to plant a seed with them that hopefully bears fruit at a later date. Just to run through these slides real quick, our program was established in 2000, primarily nonviolent juveniles. It's a balanced and restorative justice model. We use community volunteers. We have approximately 31 panels across Montgomery County that are staffed by community volunteers. Right now, I have over 150 volunteers staffing those panels. You can go to the next slide if you can. Our eligibility criteria, which we expanded in 2020, we now take 18-year-olds who are still in high school. We take summary violations except traffic stuff. Most nonviolent misdemeanor offenses are eligible. A really critical change that we made in 2020 was going from a one-shot thing where kids only could get the youth aid panel one time to my 3-strike rule. So now children can be referred up to 3 separate times. And it's free to participate for all juveniles, regardless of the county that they reside in. So pretty much any child that steps foot into Montgomery County, if they get in trouble, they can be referred to our youth aid panel program. I have a lot of kids from Philadelphia that get referred to our program. It's the next slide. I take referrals from, of course, law enforcement. Juvenile court judges can refer. I do take cases that are already in the system. We strongly encourage our MDJs to use the program. Juvenile probation officers can refer, and public defenders can request that we take a look at a case for possible referral to YAP. Next slide. Okay. And then the most common things that we see are retail theft, lots of vaping, lots and lots of vaping, marijuana, underage drinking, fighting, vandalism, and sexting. Sexting is a big deal. We see a lot of it, but I will tell you retail theft is probably the thing I see the most. Retail theft and vaping marijuana are really big for us. Okay, next slide. We also offer case management services, although I do have an asterisk. I am about to lose most of my funding for my case management services by this fall. But we have been offering case management services for children who are at risk of not completing the program. And we've been able to offer them case managers who help them with completing their assignments, transportation to meetings, assisting the family with a number of social service needs, housing, food. And that has really, really made a big difference in getting a number of children across the finish line, is having the ability to give them extra help and support. Do I have any other slides? Okay. So I do want to, just go back and make the point that we have a lot of children. Everybody is seeing the news. We have a lot of children who are committing very serious offenses. Our juvenile justice system has limited resources. I think it's really important that we preserve those resources in the system for the children who have the highest need. And that would be the children who are committing felonies, right? Those children have the highest need, and our limited juvenile justice resources, we need to preserve them to support those children. Children who are committing summary and misdemeanor offenses, I strongly believe that we can and we should be dealing with those offenses and the needs of those children through diversion programs like our Youth Aid Panel program, and with diversion opportunities in the system, right? We have the ability to do it. It makes sense. And I really like to make sure people understand that as long as we can keep children out of the system, support them with their individual needs, then they have a greater chance of completing their education. And when they are educated, they have a much greater chance of having success in the future. And I think that is really important. Excuse me. I think I'm over time. I don't want to take up too much more time. I don't know if we're doing questions at the end. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. And you can read more about Angela's county's program and the work in York County and some others in Children First report around diversion. And again, that's not the limit of the great work happening across the Commonwealth, but some more examples for you. And we'll be dropping that link in the chat. I'm now going to turn it over to Sue to talk about the work that's going on in York County.
Good afternoon, everyone. Interestingly, our program was called Youth Aid Panel back in the 1990s when it was first developed. However, we changed the name due to COVID because we wanted to continue the program and have kids be able to be referred to us. And so we knew that we had to do more of that over Zoom because we weren't doing face-to-face contacts. So we actually changed the name to the Youth Diversionary Program because we made a change in which type of referrals went to our panels and which type of referrals were actually handled by our coordinators. So that's why we're now called the Youth Diversionary Program. But basically, referrals are similar to what Angela had said. We receive summary and misdemeanor offenses mostly. We do have some felonies. Usually those are cases that are actually submitted as an allegation into probation, but there is a request to actually have it be handled by the Youth Diversionary Program. So we do that, but it's very rare. Our program is designed for first-time offenders. And we look at youth that are between the ages of 10 to 17 that are eligible for the program. Most of our referrals are actually done by a police officer. The child is arrested, but before they actually do the allegation, they divert them to the Youth Diversionary Program. And then we also have the possibility, though, if an allegation does come in, probation officers do have the ability to divert it or kick it back to the Youth Diversionary Program instead of having it go through any formal process on the probation side. We can go to the next thing. So just to kind of let you know what this looks like in York County. So summaries are obviously our minor criminal offenses, and we do a lot of disorderly conducts, harassment, low-level retail. They do result in a fine if they do not complete our program. And no interventions are provided. Upgraded misdemeanors, there typically are possession of usually marijuana that we see in our county. We do right now currently have the vapes in schools, whether that is just smoking or whether it involves THC. That's what we're dealing with a lot now. If you would have asked me probably 6 years ago what we were dealing with, we had a lot of sexting going on in our county. And if referrals are returned, but we can actually have some counseling session between the coordinator and the family and the child. We actually do have a warrant advised counsel diversion that we also utilize. However, we don't provide any service in that situation. Like I said, misdemeanor felonies are typically criminal mischief, receiving stolen property, simple assault. And felonies, like I said, are very unusual, but usually like a property crime, that sort of thing. For 2024, the top referred charges in our county were disorderly conduct, drug and alcohol related, which would include the vaping, and then harassment. Next one. So Because of COVID, we split out the cases. So in-house cases are done through typically a virtual meeting by our coordinators. We currently have 2. We do have an open position in case anybody has someone out there that needs a job. And these are typically made up of our summary and ungraded misdemeanor offenses. The coordinators actually do a virtual meeting with the parent and the child. They do a contract over the phone or over the computer. They give 30 days to complete that. And then once they've done that, then the case is actually put through for expungement. The higher graded cases on the misdemeanor side, or if we have the occasional felony, those are the cases that actually go to our panels. Currently, we have, I believe, 8 panels. When we first started out, we actually had a panel in every school district in York County, so we had 16 panels. We now only have 8. So the panels are actually made up of community members. We do a training for any new volunteers so that they understand what we're looking to do. We do focus on BARDs, just like Angela had said. And then with the entering of JJSES, the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Strategies, in a later slide, I'll show you some of the things that we now do as part of the contracts with young people to actually have them develop a competency while holding them accountable. And with our panels, obviously, the youth and the parent meets with the panel face-to-face. They have an initial meeting. The panel comes up with the actual contract and what that looks like, what the activities, what am I thinking? I'm lost thought there. But then they do the contract. The youth has the ability to do that. Typically, the contract lasts 3 to 4 months. And if they need assistance, they can actually reach out to the coordinator. So here's a list of some of the contract activities we do. If there is a victim, we do have a youth actually do an apology letter to the victim and also a thank you letter to the referring police officer. We want youth to understand the value of being diverted through this program and that it is helping them not become more involved in the juvenile justice system. We also, if there's a victim, we do opt for a victim awareness group. We actually run that within our own office. Then with JJS, we started using the carry guides and the bits, which are a lot of competency development. It focuses on like thought processing, decision-making, that sort of thing. We do have them do actually short essays and research on marijuana, how it affects your health or vaping. We did just bring on a program that's called Event e-Learning. This offers a number of modules that can deal with a number of different things, like disorderly like the harassing, the bullying, sexting is the one that we're using currently, but we probably will actually expand that after we see how it goes this year. One of the ones that we've been using for several years is Yes, which is an online shoplifting program. Now, there is a $75 fee for that program. And one of the other projects that I think have a lot of effect for youth to really understand how their behavior has affected others, a ripple effect. And so we actually have youth sit down and start with themselves and what they've done and how many other people in each circle has that behavior affected, not just them, not just the victim, but how that affects the community, their parents, that sort of thing. And a lot of times that's a real eye-opener that the youth don't always see that how their actions is not just between them, maybe and the victim, but how it actually affects other folks in the community as well. Next one. So I did actually put in some YDP, Youth Diversionary Program stats for 2024 for here in York. So 75% of our referrals are summaries and ungraded misdemeanors, and this makes up the majority. 25% are graded misdemeanors, a few felonies, and all of those are actually processed through volunteer panels. School resource officers are submitting a lot of our referrals during the school year. So we have a lot more referrals between like September and June than we do like over the summer months. In 2024, we had a total of 396 referrals. We closed out 308 cases. We did return some, either because the youth did not show up, did not want to participate, or there was an ineligibility because they may already been with us or had prior history within the juvenile justice system. But of the remaining 238 cases that were closed, we had an 87% success rate. So we are definitely having youth understand the value of doing this program and how it actually builds some competency. And typically we don't see most of our kids coming back through our system again once they have successfully completed the youth diversionary program. As you can see, only 6% were unsuccessful in 2024. So I do agree diversion is a great tool. I think it's a great way for youth to just make bad decisions, and not that they're bad youth or anything like that. They just got caught up in something. And this is a way to divert them from even entering the system at all. And so this is where we get into diverting youth before they ever get through probation doors. Whereas obviously we do other diversions before we want to look at any kind of adjudication through informals and consent decrees. But actually these kind of programs are where we should really be putting a lot of our energy, because we want to make sure that these youth don't have to go through our system if they don't have to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you so much, Angela, for sharing the work happening in your counties. As I said, there's lots of impactful work happening across the Commonwealth, and these are two of those examples. We've learned practically what diversion can look like. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the context. I'll try to do this quickly. And we're going to talk about the system broadly and specifically Pennsylvania's system. But I want to highlight one important point before I get to that data. And this is research-based, and that is that breaking the law as a kid does not necessarily mean a life of crime. Most people outgrow law-breaking behavior they engage in as adolescents. However, the evidence shows that the deeper kids go into the justice system, the more intensive and restrictive the interventions they receive, the worse their outcomes tend to be. You know, when we serve kids in their homes and their communities, they have a lower likelihood of recidivism. So they're less likely to commit repeat offenses. They're less likely to be locked up again. We also, if they're locked up, they tend to have worse health, a decreased likelihood of graduating high school, so that impacts employment. So we should do whatever we can, to everyone's point that's already been made, right, to keep kids at home, both for them and for our communities. So just some quick data. In 2023, to give you a sense of scope, more than 17,000 children were charged in juvenile court in Pennsylvania. 2/3 of those charges were for summary offenses and misdemeanors, like you've heard already, like disorderly conduct and loitering. All of these children receive an assessment about their risk of reoffending, and just 6% of kids charged were determined to be at high risk of reoffending, and over half were determined to be at low risk. So when you hear some of the media outcry, yes, there are people doing pretty serious things, but most of the kids are not necessarily committing those really intensive things, and they're often not at high risk of doing it again. Kids in Pennsylvania enter the system for things that could be avoided. They're misbehaving at school, as you heard. School resource officers are calling in, are reporting allegations. They're not paying fines and fees. Historically, the system has relied on detention and out-of-home placement over solutions like diversion and community-based options. The Bipartisan Juvenile Justice Task Force previously found that 60% of kids in Pennsylvania were there for misdemeanors and 40% for a first-time offense. Racial disparities, this is not unique to Pennsylvania, but they are prevalent here in Pennsylvania. In 2023, Black youth made up just under 40% of delinquency findings, but represent about 12% of the total youth population in the state. Black youth also comprised 61.5% of admissions to secure detention short-term, and for almost half of long-term facility placements. Youth of color disproportionately receive those harsher responses, including incarceration. And the statewide data shows that they receive a lower share of diversion than their white peers. The good news is that over the past couple of years, Pennsylvania has begun trending in the right direction. Consistent with the rest of the nation, our Commonwealth has reduced youth incarceration over the past decade. And statewide, the use of diversion is going up thanks to the great work happening across the counties. More than 75% of new charges were diverted across the Commonwealth in 2023. This is an increase from previous years. 86% of non-felony charges were diverted from trial, up from just over 80% a couple of years ago. And most first-time justice-involved youth are receiving diversion across the state. One thing I do want to highlight, however, is that we are in a county-administered system. And what that means is differences in resources, programming, and decision makers. And for those of you who have interacted with multiple different counties based on your roles or your residence, like many of our other systems and services, diversion can vary widely across counties as well. There's no statewide standard or baseline for when youth are offered diversion or must be offered diversion. Counties have different models, different approaches, different offenses that qualify, and different eligibility criteria. So what this can mean is if the same thing happens in one county, you may have a chance at diversion, but if you move a few streets over across that county line, something else may happen. You may go through the formal system. This chart shows you some of the variance. We don't have access to really granular data about this, but the number of new juvenile cases diverted varying across counties. On average, statewide, we said 75%. But as you can see here, while some counties are doing a lot of diversion, diverting over 70% of new charges, 25 out of 67 diverted fewer than 70% of new cases. And to give you an idea of how wide the gap is, one county diverted just 35% of new cases, while others were able to divert upwards of 80 to 90%. So that's a pretty big difference. As you heard from some of the county level successful data, well, first of all, we're hoping to kind of close this gap and reduce these disparities because diversion works. About 80% of Pennsylvania children receiving diversion complete it successfully. National data shows that kids who receive diversion have a 17% lower recidivism rate after 5 years than those who go through the formal legal system. So that really benefits our communities. It makes them safer as well. There are two ways that we're looking at possibly addressing this: legislation to standardize it and a budget investment to help counties start and expand new work. Representative Krajewski is going to tell you about the bill he's about to introduce, and then I'll tell you briefly about a budget investment we are building support for from the state. So at this time, and his hand is raised, I will turn it over to Representative
Good afternoon.
from
I don't know
the
why it keeps raising my hand.
district.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hi there, Representative Krajewski. It is all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to Children's First for hosting this space. It's really great to be with people who understand and recognize that kids should be treated like kids and that they deserve second chances. I'm really grateful to be able to be a part of the conversation around expanding youth diversion through our legislation. Before I dig into the bill, just wanted to talk a little bit about why I'm personally invested in expanding diversion. And a lot of the amazing presenters have already covered a lot of the reasons why diversion makes sense, but I'm going to give my perspective and hopefully add some stuff as well. So I represent the 188th Legislative District, which is in West Philadelphia. Just a few blocks north of my district and probably a 10-minute walk from where I live is the Juvenile Justice Service Center, which is the juvenile detention center for Philadelphia. If folks have followed the Philadelphia news, you've seen headline after headline about the fact that our detention center is just completely overwhelmed. There are youth that are being sent to the detention center for very small minor offenses who are being backed up and aren't getting their treatment plans. You have staff that are over capacity. You have youth that are crowded in holding cells or in sleeping areas. I had the chance to tour the facility in 2023 as a member of the Children and Youth Committee and was extremely mortified by what I saw. I saw kids who were in chains who as young as 11 years old. I saw staff who were trying to do the best they could with an extremely difficult situation. And in a context like that, no one wins. The youth suffer, the staff suffers, the facility suffers. And so it's really incumbent upon us as advocates and legislators and community members to do something about this. And the lucky thing is we have data and programs to show the path forward. As already mentioned, many of the youth that we are discussing are first-time offenders, are youth who are being held for minimal offenses, youth who actually will be at more risk for recidivism if they follow the traditional criminal legal path in which the data has shown, diversion programs actually result in less recidivism. It gives youth more of a chance for a path to success and a less likelihood of reoffending. As Stefanie just put on the slides, you have over 80% of youth who successfully complete their diversion programs. We've seen it happen here in Philadelphia. We've seen it happen in other parts of the state. So we have policies and programs, and we've heard from Montgomery County and York County about how these programs work at allowing youth to be able to exit the system and still be held accountable and still have a path towards restoration and rehabilitation, but a path that is appropriate for the level of the offense that they've committed. And so we know these programs work. We know we have them in counties across Pennsylvania. But as Stefanie mentioned, there is no standard around diversion, both in terms of when diversion should be recommended and also a statewide standard in access to diversion programs. We have, many programs here in Philadelphia, but we still don't have standards around when a court should refer a child to diversion programs. But you also have counties that have very minimal diversion programs and standards around them. And the truth is a youth that's in Philadelphia who commits offense should not be treated any different than a youth in Dauphin County or Butler County. They should all be given the same opportunity for second chances and for diversion. And so that's really what we are aiming to do with the legislation that we are going to introduce. It's exciting to say that this is a bill that's part of a larger package of bills we're moving called the CARE package to address many of the issues in our juvenile justice system. We've had multiple press conferences announcing the legislation. We had a lobby day where we even had local elected officials from Philadelphia come up to lobby my colleagues about diversion and why it's important to support this legislation. So I'm feeling really excited about where things are at in terms of moving this forward as a priority. We are entering budget season next month in June. And this is top of mind for me as a legislative priority to start to work with my colleagues on. My hope is we can start to have some conversations within our committees about juvenile justice generally, and then use that to really focus on why expanded diversion programs should be a no-brainer and should be something that we get bipartisan support from, which we already have on this call because we have myself and we have Attorney General Sunday. So my hope is using this coalition we've already built, we can move this bill forward, we can create more awareness about the problems with our juvenile justice system, and we can expand a program that works, that's sensible, that does balance accountability and also balances fairness. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you, and I'll pass it back to Stefanie.
Thank you so much, Representative. I'm going to really quickly share about budget investments so we can get through these questions, because I know that some of you are eager to hear from our speakers a little bit more about their information. So, we've got a legislative path, but recognizing that there are just differences in resources and capacity across counties. Right now, there's no dedicated state level funding stream just for youth diversion. There's counties are funding these programs through a combination of private and public grants. So some of that comes from the federal government currently, different county and state funds, but nothing says that this is the fund for youth diversion. And as I'm sure you're all aware, there is a shifting federal landscape right now, and it has already impacted the federal funding streams that the agency and the Department of Justice and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention that does fund a lot of the federal financing that can support diversion programs. So it may be resulting in a loss of existing grants or fewer new grant opportunities from the federal government. So something to have in mind. So Children First and some coalition partners, we are trying to build support for a state investment in diversion that really focuses on that. And the vehicle that seems to make the most sense right now is to create some grant funding through the Commission on Crime and Delinquency, which is a grant-making body. For those of you who don't know that, in the state of Pennsylvania, that does already administer some of the grants that support programs like these. And so it could be applied for by a variety of entities, probation departments, district attorneys' offices, individual nonprofit providers, to fit the needs of the identified county in order to start new programs for those that don't have them, or to build capacity to serve more young people for those that do. And so we're really hoping to make that happen. So these things could be, sort of happening hand in hand with one another. I want to share how to get involved yourself before we jump into Q&A. Goes without saying, roughly half of counties have a youth aid panel. If your county has one, and you want to be a part of that and be directly involved, consider volunteering to join the panel. You can see where your county's panel is administered and reach out to them. If you support either of the proposals you just heard about, you can call your state lawmakers and let them know that. If you're interested in juvenile justice policy more broadly, you can contact me and you can join the Youth Safety Coalition and learn more about the legislative efforts that are currently underway. It goes way beyond diversion, but we would need like a 12-hour webinar for that. So that will be maybe another time. I want to thank our speakers so much, and then quickly get into a couple of the questions that were in the Q&A and the chat before we close. We talked about this a little bit. Taslim asked how we can do this in every county. And so I don't know if any of the other panelists, we have a suggestion about, we have some proposals on the table for other ways to expand the work to every county. And anything you all are doing to connect with your peers in other counties would be great. I don't know if anyone has anything to add, but we talked about the expansion efforts.
So you
Yes,
want, we're looking for, okay.
Sure, yeah, Angela, if you have something to add there.
Well, just that, I think, start with the district attorney, start with the local DA to say that you think diversion is important, find out what they currently have, what they might be interested in starting. That's a starting point.
Thank you. And I think that's consistent with what we've heard from other folks doing this work as well, as that's a very important partner to have in the process. Angela, someone asked in the chat if counselors were able to refer kids to the youth aid panel. I'm not sure if they meant just like a community counselor or a school counselor, but is that an option?
No, that is not an option. Because if they have committed a crime, then that referral has to come from one of the referral sources I've listed. But I like the question, because if they have not committed a crime, and if you are referring to a school counselor, then that code of conduct violation needs to be handled in school with the discipline methods that the school has available. I didn't get a chance to say that I actually have a pilot program running in Montgomery County. I have 5 school districts who have implemented a school-based youth aid panel program for us that models the district attorney's YAP program. So I encourage more school districts to do that, because there are many, many code of conduct violations that school districts, unfortunately, refer to law enforcement, and they should not. They should handle those things in-house.
Thank you. Donna Fields asked about programs in Philadelphia. I'll go ahead and answer that and say, yes, there are actually several diversion programs available in Philadelphia, and there is one in the school district of Philadelphia, the school assisted police diversion program. And that is highlighted in our report. There's additional diversion opportunities in the city, and we can send out some follow-up information. I'll say any questions we don't get to, we'll try to follow up afterwards, just because I know we're running extremely short on time. at this point. Um, Ashley asked if a young person is diversion eligible but in need of services, is if there's an option for the matter to be dismissed outright. Is that something that happens, Sue or Angela?
Not like, well, if they've committed a crime, but there's something happening, some situation, police officers will look to try to make sure the action they take in response to whatever action the child took. The police a lot of time are going to try to approach it in a manner that gets that child where they will get the help and support they need. Some things, it's best to come to me because there's a certain level of support that I can give them through the youth aid panel. But unfortunately, depending on the circumstances, there are sometimes kids that we actually need to send to juvenile probation because there may be a higher level of need that I can't give them. Sue, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, sometimes we've had youth referred to us that have realized that need mental health services. So we've actually helped the family get connected to the local mental health and get a caseworker and case manager because they just didn't know how to navigate the system. So sometimes that is what we do. We actually connect them to the real services they need in the community. And then maybe we have them do something, but we don't actually then try to send it back. We try to make it more of a successful or warned, advised, counseled, because that youth needs services that they can better glean from other agencies in our system. And so that's how we would handle it.
And remember that when the case is withdrawn, they can apply for expungement.
Thank you. I know we are running up on time. Sue and Angela, do you have, and Rep, do you have 1 or 2 more minutes if we wanted to answer these last couple of questions, or do you have to hop?
Nope.
I got a couple minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
We're good.
Angela, there was a question around funding for your diversion program, and you mentioned funding running out and what would happen. As an example, just like what sources fund the
So the Youth Aid Panel program is a program of the district attorney. What I was referring to, my case management services have been grant funded. And as you mentioned, OJJDP, PCCD, the current administration has wiped out all of the funding sources that we've relied on to provide case management. That's what I'm losing. So it's unfortunate.
Thank you for sharing that. And I assume you're not alone in this experience, and folks are really wondering what's going to happen.
Yeah, the program remains. We're still going to have a youth aid panel program. I'm just not going to be able to offer case management services.
Got it. Sue, there was a question specifically for you around if there was feedback attained from the young people who returned and were considered ineligible.
Well, I wanted to address, ineligible means that our programs run for first-time offenders. So if they've been through the program before, or if they've been through juvenile probation before, they would not be eligible for our program. And then the other part is sometimes they return because at the intake, the youth or the parent decides they don't want to do the program. So then if it's a voluntary program, so you have to want to participate. So if they don't participate, then we would send it back as well. Or if there's no response to the referral, we can't get a hold of them, they won't ever follow up with us, and it would also be a return. So that's usually what's in there when it's ineligible or it's returned back to the arresting officer.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then I think this is the last question. Just curious to hear what the team's thoughts are on scaling diversion programs up to address juvenile delinquency in areas with higher levels of poverty and family stability and possibly more serious crimes, including felonies.
Okay, I think that's actually kind of two parts. But in terms of scaling up, that's what my case management services is for. When kids come into the Youth Aid Panel program, they're coming in because of an offense they committed. Once they go before one of my panels, and that's usually when we find out everything else that's happening in their life. That's when I assign a case manager. The case managers do home visits for me. They are my eyes and ears inside that house. They are able to tell me what kind of environment is this child living in, operating in, what's happening in this child's life. With case management services, I'm able to determine that extra higher level of help and support that they need. My case managers have taken food to houses where they found out the refrigerator was completely empty. They have helped families connect to housing. We've had kids be referred to YAP, and then we found out the family was homeless, living in a motel. My case managers help them get connected to resources. I have young ladies that come into YAP because they got caught stealing, and then my case manager finds out she's pregnant. You name it, we find out. And that's why the case management services are so important for these kids, because I tell people all the time, 98% of the time, when children break the law, they are responding to their environment or to their own individual needs. The other 2%, yes, we got kids that just for no apparent reason do something silly or stupid. They're very easy to deal with. That 98% that is responding to their mental health needs or to their environment, those children need help and support. They don't need prosecution. But I also have to say, and I apologize, I know we're over, but I want to try to make sure I'm covering that question because there was a lot to it. You also have to understand that when children come into my program or Sue's program, my authority is over that child, not the parents. I have no authority over that parent. All I can do is offer support and hope that they are willing to take it in order to get their child that diversion. I hope they take it, but I have no authority to require a parent to do anything. So you have to understand that. A lot of times now, unfortunately, I have parents who get in my way of me trying to help their children. I literally sometimes have to go around them in order to help their children. Parents can be a great help or they can be a problem.
I will definitely second that, D'Angela. It's definitely true.
And so if your question had anything to do with situations where we need to remove children, right? That's a whole nother agency that will be called if necessary, because we are all, even my volunteers, are mandatory reporters. And we will bring in the appropriate agencies to deal with parents if needed.
Okay. Well,
and I got 3 minutes in case there's any more questions for me. I will take 1 or 2 more.
Thank you so much. Donna asked if you work with and receive support from DHS to determine the outcome.
Well, we
when that happens. I guess
if we-
CYS for
right.
you
Well,
all.
if we
so
find
it's
out that a
DHS.
youth is involved with children and youth, we do reach out to whoever the caseworker is to let them know they're involved in our program. They don't really have a whole lot to do with what the outcome is, because obviously we're the referrals for whatever that youth has committed, and we're working with him or her to, deal with that. So we do ask for their input, though, if we know that they have an open case, to kind of correlate with what's going on, to make sure that we're not overstepping, in terms of things that they may have put in place in the family, that sort of thing.
I do not communicate with them unless I have to. The youth aid panel is confidential, and only people who need to know that that child has been referred. However, and that's if the child is still with mom, right? If they have been removed from mom and they've been placed somewhere, I do have to communicate with them or a foster mom or an agency, because that agency or foster mom has to give me access to the child. They have to support this child for that child to get through the program. So I communicate with anybody, any outside entities or people, on a need to know basis. Because one thing I have found in this, there is such a thing as too many cooks spoil the soup. Sometimes there's too many people that want to have a say, want to know what's going on. You don't always need to know everything. I deal with people on a need to know basis. I find that when we keep it simple, we focus on what that child is here for and what their needs are, we get a lot more accomplished.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for hanging on to go through these questions. I think they answered a lot of things folks wanted to know. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join us. I'm going to throw on this last slide so you can see contact information. Thank you. Extreme gratitude to the speakers that were here today that joined us. General Sunday, Angela, Sue, Rep. Krajewski, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all the participants. My email address is on this slide. You'll also get the slides as a follow-up. You'll get some other follow-up information if you attended. And for folks that registered and didn't make it, we'll get it as well. This is recorded, so it'll be accessible after. Thank you so much. Please contact me if you'd like to get involved. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks again for your time.